Good evening. I'm Maxine Miller with the League of Women Voters, and I want to thank the audience and the viewers and encourage you to vote in the November 6th election. I want to thank the candidates for participating tonight. And this program has been made possible by the LCSE TV production manager, Jason Goldammer, the City of Lewiston, and the League of Women Voters. Teddy Roach is our moderator tonight. She has been a moderator for us for the 2007 City Council debate, and she is back at our request. Now, Teddy is the owner of Express Employment. She is an LCSE graduate and is currently serving on 4 advisory boards for LCSE. I'm going to turn the program over to Teddy, and she will introduce the candidates. Thank you, Teddy.
Thank you, Maxine. And I, too, would like to welcome everyone for coming this evening and welcome everyone at home in the audience as well to our public candidate debate, again sponsored by the League of Women Voters, Lewis Clark State College, and the City of Lewiston. This is going to be broadcast daily, rebroadcast, and if you look at the flyers that are before you that you received when you came in, the times are posted up in the upper right-hand corners, and this is going to run through the election. It's also going to be available on the City of Lewiston's website. It's a YouTube video that you can go ahead and watch. I want to take a quick moment and ask everyone, including our candidates, if you have cell phones, please turn them off out of respect for all of our candidates and also the listening audience. And be aware that if it goes off during the debate this evening, that I'll have you come up and start asking you questions too. I'd like to go ahead and introduce our candidates for this evening, and I would ask that you please hold your applause until I've introduced all of them. First, from District 6, for the State Senate seat, we have John Bradbury and Dan Johnson. For the District 6 Representative Position A seat, we have Pete Gertonson and Thyra Stevenson. For the Nez Perce County Commissioner District 1, we have Kevin Kelly and Robert Tippett. For Nez Perce County Sheriff, we have Dale Buttrey and Joe Rodriguez. For Nez Perce County Prosecutor, Kimron Torgerson and Dan Spickler. From District Representative, or District 6 Representative Position 6, or Position B rather, Daniel Santiago was unable to, or he declined to participate due to a prior commitment. And because he's not here available, we were unable to ask Dr. John Rusci to sit in front and ask or answer to some questions. So that is another office that's running. This event tonight is designed to help you become educated to make your voting decisions on Tuesday, November 6th. So we ask that you please do. And when you do go to vote, please make sure that you take a picture identification and information that will verify your residency, because that is a new requirement this year. You need to be registered to vote by October 12th, which is this Friday, so you have 3 days to get pre-registered. Because absentee voting is allowed, and it will be done at the Bramer Building, and that can be done from tomorrow through November 2nd, but you must be registered in order to do that. The process this evening, we're going to have several questions that we're going to be asking our candidates. The first question is going to be asked of all 10 candidates, and that will be the only one that we do that way. After we ask that one question, then we will take position by position and ask questions. I will also announce what the response time will be. It will either be 1 minute or 2 minutes, and I will tell you who gets to participate when, so you don't have to try to guess to see who goes. Within each contested race with their multiple questions, then I'll alternate who will respond first. This year we have a light bar that is before you, and as you start answering your question, the green light will go on. When you have 15 seconds left, the orange light will go on. It doesn't mean to speed up like we do in the stoplights. And the red light will come on when you are to stop. And you are to stop at that point. If you don't, I will stop you. And believe me, I can do that. I will remind those of you in the audience during the evening that if you do have questions, we ask that you write them down. We've supplied you with some paper, and I see that some of you have brought paper as well. Please write those down clearly and periodically place them or pass them out to the aisles, and representatives from the League of Women Voters will be there to pick them up. And time allowing, we will ask those questions of our candidates at the end. So with that, candidates, are you ready? Timer and light person, are you ready? Well, how about we get started? Okay, the first question is going to be posed to all candidates. And the first person who will respond will be Mr. Bradbury. So to all candidates, you will have 2 minutes to respond. Please share with the audience your reasons for running for the office that you are seeking. Mr. Bradbury.
My primary reason is because I think that education in Idaho has been grossly underfunded. I am a firm believer that the Constitution gives us equal rights, but it is a free, first-rate public education that gives everyone an equal opportunity. I think the bank teller's daughter should have the same chance in life as the bank owner's son. It's a matter of everybody being able to realize their God-given potential to its fullest extent. It's how we free ourselves. It is the thing that liberates us and makes it possible to pursue our own dreams. And unless we have that, everything else suffers. So my answer to that is very easy. It is a first-rate education. The funding for schools has declined by 11% in the last 10 years. We're lower in the percentage of state spending budget than we've ever been. For higher education, if you can believe it or not, in the last 4 years, funding for higher education has gone down 26%. We've lost our way. At the same time, the legislature is voting to give $35 million tax cut that allows a millionaire, a person who makes $1 million in 1 year, to get a $4,000 tax break while we're cutting education. I think we've lost our way. I think that's morally wrong. I think it's politically wrong. And I think every kid in this state ought to have the same chance as I had when I worked my way through the University of Idaho and law school, working in the woods in the summer and waiting tables during the school year. Today, it costs about $20,000 to go to the University of Idaho. And if you have a teaching degree, you start out with a beginning salary of $30,000. Try paying off a student loan of $80,000, feeding your family, and paying the mortgage on $30,000 a year. We can do better. We must do better. And I'm here to try to get in a position where I can help us do better. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson.
Quite simply, I'm running because I care about the people and the places of Idaho, and I'm at a point in my life when I can give back to this community, and that's what I want to do.
Thank you. Mr. Gertonson.
First, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for putting this thing on, and those people that are here in the audience tonight for leaving your homes and coming down here and probably walking a block to get here, and the people at home for giving up gun smoke and watching the voter candidate debate, and particularly the candidates here who had the courage to accept the League of Women Voters invitation. Why am I running for office? To me, things are broken. Things are broken down in Boise. We have a legislature that is made up of people who don't like to listen to each other. And I've spent my summer out talking to folks on the street, and they're a little fed up with it. They're just a little fed up with it. In the Postal Service, I took training as a facilitator. That meant that I worked with people who often didn't get along, but we sat down and we figured things out. And I think we need a little bit more of that in this state. We need people who are willing to listen to each other, to come to a consensus, yes, and even compromise. A good compromise is one where nobody feels like they got the good deal. So that's why I'm running for this office. I feel I'm that person that can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Stevenson.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening and introduce myself to you and here in the audience and at home. As you know, I've been a Lewiston City Councilor for the past 3 years, and after serving on the Airport Advisory Board and a number of other civic organizations, as an elected official, I've learned the effect that state policy has on local municipalities, and those would be things that we know very well here and we feel. Taxes, property taxes, that kind of taxation, regulations, DEQ, EPA, those kinds of things really affect our lives in this area. And we've experienced a lot of turmoil this past year about education reforms. So I'm motivated by the desire to represent all the communities of our new district, that's in Lewis County as well as Nez Perce County, bring my skills, my experience, and my proven record to the House of Representatives. My managerial experience spans teaching from public and private sectors. I was a manager in a billion-dollar high-tech industry, president of a small business, ordained church leadership, airline and military captain. As a woman, I believe that I will bring a special balance to the Idaho House. I lead to achieve results, and I do that by using a strong team. I have the passion to represent all the voters of this district, and I'd like your vote on November 6th.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, everybody, for allowing us to be here. The reason I'm running for County Commission District 1, part of what Pete said is also true, not just in Boise, but here in our county. And it's my wish to be able to represent all of the county. The budget is a big issue, especially with the jail bond issue. But cutting the budget in certain areas, I feel has been hurting more people, hurting certain people more than others, and that's why I'm running. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tippett.
Thank you. I want to thank LCSC and the city also, along with the League of Women Voters, for putting on this debate tonight. It's been difficult waiting since the primary until now and trying to get the message out, and yet you don't want to be campaigning too often because you kind of wear people out hearing from you. So we kept a little bit quiet for 3 or 4 months there, but I'm running because I have the time, I have the experience, I have the energy to put into this job and to assist the county, or I can add value to the county. My background gives me that experience to add value. I was a small business owner for 22 years in Yuma, Arizona. I grew business from 2 of us to 45 employees, doing over $2.5 million a year in business. I worked for IBM for a number of years. And then in 1995-96, I got into doing economic development. I worked for the city of Yuma for a while, then I went to Lake Havasu City and went to work for the state of Arizona, representing all of everything north of Phoenix. And if you know Arizona at all, that's 2/3 of the state. So I got to know the state of Arizona pretty well. A job opened up in Lewiston. It found me. I found Lewiston a very attractive area. I moved up here over 9 years ago, and I've been doing economic development, working in this community, and I love it up here. And I retired in 2010, and I have family all over the country. I travel to see them. I play golf a little bit. I work in my yard, but I've got this background. I thought, I have plenty of time. I've got the experience. I want to put it into doing I want to put it into working with the county in their economic development program throughout, if we can, in helping balance the budget. We have some major issues facing us, and in working with the communications in the community. So I appreciate your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Buttrey.
Well, thank you. And on behalf of all the men and women of the Nez Perce County Sheriff's Office, we want to thank you for your support that you've shown us over the last 4 years. If you remember back 4 years ago, our image had been tarnished. It took one man to do that, but it took the whole department to get back on track. My staff and myself have gotten the department back on track, and we're headed in the right direction. And I know you know that because of the cards and the letters and the support that we have gotten from the public, and we appreciate that. There's been having to be some hard decisions made. And sometimes making the right decision is not always the most popular decision, but it's the right one. And it's based on good facts, and we have to stand by them and go forward. And that's why I'm up for re-election. I believe the sheriff's office is on the right track. We're going the right way, and I'm going to keep it going. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez?
Thank you very much for coming here. My goals for running for sheriff, I have strategic planning and goals. Domestic violence, drugs, thefts, and burglaries. As times have changed and the economy has changed, so have the criminals. We have people that are doing internet crimes, cell phone crimes. People in the community are receiving those all the time, but yet we have nobody involved in that. The person who I selected as my undersheriff, Scott Gleason, is certified through the state, and he's willing to bring that knowledge to the sheriff's office to assist us in fighting these crimes. I see the lacking in some portions where certain things aren't going the way they should go. As far as we need to get somebody back into the drug task force. We don't only have illegal drugs that are going, we have prescription drugs. And we are starting to get our younger community that's involved in that. And so we need to get somebody back involved in the drug task force. We also need to have interagency working relationship. Right now I see that we're not training as much as we should with Stoughton County, Stoughton City, Clarkston, Idaho State Police, Bureau of Indian Affairs, or Nez Perce Tribal Police. We need to have that interrelationship with other agencies to where we're training, to where when you're working graveyard, you have one or two guys, you're going to end up going to a different jurisdiction or rely on another jurisdiction to come with you, and you need that person to have that training and ability to know what each other are doing. So that's why I'm running for the sheriff's office.
Thank you. Mr. Torgerson?
Thank you very much. And again, I would express, like others, the gratitude that you put on this forum and that we are allowed to speak, and the people who have shown up that are here to listen. I'm a native of this area. I grew up in Bowlville and then here in Lewiston. And after I graduated from college, I continued to be a resident, even though I was in the military and until I retired from the military. And I've worked here in Lewiston as an attorney. I've worked in Cooney County as a deputy prosecutor. And then in Lewis County, I've been the prosecutor for a number of years, 15 plus at this point in time. But I've left that office. My wife and I are planning to retire here. I've returned here as a resident. And my kids live here. My grandchild lives here. And I want to make a difference in the community. I have some skills that I believe are necessary at this point in time. As far as communication, I've always enjoyed good relationships with the county commissioners I worked with, the sheriff's departments, Idaho State Police. And I think that one of the basic underpinnings of any county is the intercommunications within the county. That involves the elected officials, of course, and also, more importantly, as a prosecutor, the communications between law enforcement and the prosecutor's office. And so I'm offering myself as here, and I would appreciate your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Spickler.
Thank you. I would echo what everybody has said about the opportunities given to us as candidates, and thank the League of Women Voters and LCSC for this opportunity. The reason I'm running is 12 years ago, I was recruited to run for prosecutor. I hadn't really thought about the prospect, but various heads of departments around the city and the county came to me and said there was no relationship with the prosecutor's office, that the functioning of the prosecutor's office at that time was at an all-time low. The reputation was at an all-time low. The functioning was terrible. The morale was bad, and so I went around and I met with some of these people one-on-one and got a reading on how things were going, and sure enough, it seemed just as bad as I was told. And so I decided to go ahead and throw my hat in the ring, and won a convincing victory. And I spent the first year as the first person in the office and the last person to leave, and spent every day since then for the last 12 years working on building relationships with agencies such as the Sheriff's Office and the Idaho State Police and the Lewiston Police Department and the welfare investigators and the assessor's office and the treasurer's office.
Mr. Spickler. Thank you. See, I told you.
Well, you weren't kidding.
That's right.
Thank you.
Okay. The next 4 questions will be only to the Senate and House candidates, so the rest of you can relax for a little bit. And we will start first with Mr. Johnson. This is a 2-minute response. Could you explain why you would or would not vote for legislation that supports taxing higher income earners, especially given the status of funding for education and the fact that the state's reserves are depleted?
Thank you for that question. No, I would not support raising taxes on that income group. In fact, we lowered taxes last session. We cut the corporate income tax and the personal income tax rates. Just this year, the United States became #1 in the world in combined federal and state corporate income taxes. That doesn't make us competitive in a global environment. And if you watch the presidential debates the other night, that issue was brought up. On the personal side, we have to remember that about 80% of our small businesses in Idaho file their income taxes on the personal income tax side. So they benefit as much as anyone does from a tax cut. Tax revenues to date in the state of Idaho are running ahead of projections. I believe we're headed in the right direction, and we're going to continue that way. CNBC last week rated Idaho as the most improved state for business. That's positive news. Those are good things for Idaho. So I feel like we're doing right things. I feel like our tax policy, the cuts that we made last year, will contribute to growth in our economy. And when the economy grows, then that brings more revenues back to the state. And so that's the approach that I took last session. I think it's working. I think it was the right thing to do.
Thank you. Mr. Gertonson.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Certainly. Could you explain why you would or would not vote for legislation that supports taxing higher income earners, especially given the status of funding for education and the fact that the state's reserves are depleted?
I think I would support fair taxation and stable taxation. I would support legislation for that. Right now we have a tax policy that seems to be fluctuating depending on the special interest group's interest. So I would say that if we had a tax policy that was fair, stable, so people could understand that what the tax policy and the rules are today would be there 5 years from now, instead of changing with every different legislature. When it comes to our education funding, we have $1.5 billion worth of tax exemptions out there. We've not only created a state that some of its citizens are dependent upon the government for help, but we're creating a welfare state for corporations. And if we're doing so well, and our tax structure is so great in this country, and I think it's number 4, the problem is we're missing the other parts of the equation to make the whole thing work out. I've talked to business owners over the summer, and I have yet to find one business owner that hired anybody with that 0.2% tax cut. The only thing I've been able to figure out what happened there is we had some people that got some really nice dinners and the taxpayers didn't get thanked for it.
Thank you. Ms. Stevenson.
I believe that I would not support legislation that taxes higher income earners, and there are a number of reasons. Most importantly, I support invigorating Idaho's economy and invigorating the business climate, and to tax one, as you mentioned, higher earners does not stimulate the economy and create jobs, just the reverse. And as a matter of fact, often higher earners are not paying taxes on income. What they pay taxes on are things like dividends and so on. So it's not clear that a tax on income on higher earners is going to do the job. The Idaho state tax revenues information was released the other day. Forecasts in September were up. Sales tax slightly ahead of forecast. We had very good news that was reported in the Tribune the other day, and I view those as being positive indicators, and at this time I would not support taxing higher income earners.
Thank you. Mr. Bradbury.
I do support taxing higher income earners, and I assume that includes both individuals and corporations. We taxpayers, everybody in this room pays a sales tax. Everybody viewing pays a sales tax. The largest corporations in Idaho, Idaho Power, Simplot, Clearwater Paper, all of those don't pay any sales tax on things that they buy for their corporations. We citizens together pay $1.1 billion in sales tax. If they paid the same taxes as the rest of us pay, there'd be an additional $1.7 billion to fund education and fund infrastructure. It's not punishing them. It's just having them pay the same share that we do. It's a matter of fairness. It's not a matter of punishing. And they should be playing their part. They get the advantage of education. They get the advantage of infrastructure, and they don't pay for it. They don't pay their share. My opponent says we're headed in the right direction. We have the lowest per capita income in the United States. We have the second lowest spending per student in the United States. We are the 4th lowest in spending for mental illness and the 3rd highest for suicides. And if you take 24 and lower, we have the highest suicide rate in the nation. We have 600,000 people in Idaho that live at or near poverty, and 250,000 that don't have enough to eat. And we're giving a tax break. My opponent voted for the $35 million tax break that if it left in Medicaid would have been $110 million to take care of the elderly and the disabled and the mentally ill. That's gone. So now what's the change? What's the effect? No glasses, no eyeglasses, no hearing aids. They'll pull your teeth, but they won't give you dentures. That's not headed in the right direction. Everybody's got to pay their share. No one should be punished, but they're not paying their share, and if I'm elected, I'll try to see that they do.
Thank you. The next question is a 1-minute response, and we'll start with Mr. Gertonson. This, too, is for the Senate and House candidates. Would you support continued funding for research and management of Idaho's aquifers? Please explain.
Yes, I would. I'm a current water master and chairman of the board of the Waha Glen Water District. And I've been in that position for 20 years. And just recently, we went through the Snake River adjudication where we had to prove our water rights. Water is a big deal. If you don't have water, you don't have much else growing on top of the surface, if you haven't noticed, with the dryness we have in this area. So I would support legislation that studied the aquifers, make sure that we're managing them right, and that we're not selling our water out of this state unnecessarily.
Thank you. Ms. Stevenson?
Well, I want everyone to take note that this may be one of the few times I agree with my opponent. Write it down. But I view, yes, I would support continued research about Idaho's aquifers. Water is precious, and Idaho's water and natural resources must be protected, and especially against federal intrusion. But definitely, we need to make sure that we are protecting our water sources and our water rights.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bradbury.
I also support that proposition. I look at the Snake River aquifer that's in danger because of Hanford, where they didn't clean up a nuclear waste like they should have. There's a chance that an entire aquifer can be damaged because it hasn't been properly studied, it hasn't been properly protected. The Snake River aquifer is another example. It is absolutely the lifeblood, particularly of southern Idaho, where everybody depends, most of the farmers depend on irrigation. And I think it comes back again to being balanced. We need water for fish, we need water for irrigation, we need water to drink. And that all ought to be assessed, and it all ought to be evaluated so that everybody has access to what is a common resource. It belongs to all of us, and it should be made available to all of us in a fair and even manner.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
I would concur with Mr. Bradbury's comments.
Okay, thank you. The next question is a 2-minute response, and we'll start with Ms. Stevenson. Ethics and transparency were issues during the last legislative session. Would you support an independent ethics process and greater transparency, even if opposed by legislative leadership? Please explain.
As you can see, I have some cards with notes. I was trying to anticipate the kinds of questions that would be important to the constituents of this district, and it just so happens that ethics is one of the cards. Thank you. And I see no reason for an independent operator about ethics investigations. We have a legislative process. The public trust requires that we hold our people to the highest personal conduct, and I believe that within the context of our House and our Senate, we have what is available in order to make sure that this process and the ethics are upheld.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bradbury?
Absolutely. It is a crying need. We have a legislature in the last session where the majority leader stole a car while he was drunk, damaged it, and what did he get? A DUI, and they kept him as the majority leader in the Senate. We had a state representative who was stealing state timber. When a representative from Priest River complained about it, the Speaker of the House punished the person who made the complaint and took him off as vice chair of the committee and didn't do a thing to the person who was stealing the timber. We have Chigbra, who was Otter's treasurer, and he was given tax breaks and deals as the chairman of the tax commission. I think we ought to have an independent supervisory board that is elected. So they don't, I'm tired of the good old boy system. It's just a crying need. And my opponent voted to only allow senators to complain against senators in the Senate. He excluded all of the public. Everyone sitting here today could not complain about a senator's conduct because of the way he voted. I think that was wrong.
Time,
I would vote
Mr. Bradbury, time. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you. For the record, there was no vote on the issue that Mr. Bradbury just referenced. I will tell you, I do not support establishment of an independent ethics committee. And I can tell you that as a state legislator, we take ethics very seriously. And in fact, we write rules of conduct. And my position on that is that we should have, for example, in the Senate, we should have all 35 senators involved in writing those rules. And unfortunately, the way it's done today is the majority party will write those rules. So Although the public is not privy to the caucus meetings, I can assure you that the suggestion I submitted to that group was that all 35 senators should be in that room writing the rules on ethics. That didn't happen, but that was my vote.
Thank you. This next question is the last question for our Senate and House candidates. This will be a 1-minute response. And this question will be a little bit different. Mr. Bradbury, you will start.
Don't I get to answer
Yeah,
that
he
question?
can.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I mean, I'm just itching here.
No, I have my mark here.
All right. I want to keep the moderator moderate here.
I thought yours was the best answer.
Thank you. Thank you. Ethics and transparency in government. What a concept. You just heard John Bradbury talk about that a little bit. Some of the things. Now, tell me, do you feel that you maybe trust our state legislature a little bit more after having a recap of everything that's gone on down there? I think the most important thing that we could do is establish an independent ethics council, one that doesn't appear in no way to have any issue or conflict of interest with their decisions. Ethics and transparency is what provides the citizen with the trust. You break the public trust, and that's something that is very hard to earn again. We need ethics and we need transparency.
Thank you, and thank you for the ethical correction. Okay, now we'll do the last question. And this one will be a little bit different. It will be a 1-minute response. And Mr. Bradbury, we'll start with you. And you are to ask your opponent, so only Mr. Johnson, a question, keeping in mind that he can only have 1 minute to respond.
Okay. My question is very simple. Mr. Johnson, you have twice refused to answer how you stand on the Luna laws. And you're a public official. It's a public issue that affects the public's interest. I'd like to know whether you support the Luna laws, and if you don't support all of them, which ones you support and which ones you don't. I think the public's entitled to know, and that's my question to you.
Thank you, Mr. Bradbury, for that question. That's a good question. I was one of the individuals that signed the petition to send it to the referendum process. I was not in the legislature at that time, but I believed that that was something that should have been put to the vote of the people. I signed it. That's what I thought about the 2011 laws. Having served in the session last year, I can tell you that we made some improvements to those laws. In fact, party members from both sides voted for those improvements, including the minority and majority party leadership. Those changes will make modifications to laws, improvements. No law is perfect, and we'll always do that. So in terms of supporting the referendums, I do support 2 of them, and I'm undecided on the 3rd. And this will be a personal vote. I'm voting for myself in that. I'm not voting for the state legislature, so I decline to disclose which one I'm undecided on.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, your question of Mr. Bradbury. Again, keep in mind that he has 1 minute to respond.
Thank you. My question also is very simple. I would just like to ask if you would list 3 things that the Idaho State Legislature got right last year.
That's a tough question. Well, to be honest with you, I can't. I can't name a single thing that they got right, whether it includes taxes, it includes ethics, whether it includes education, whether it includes infrastructure. Nothing's apparent to me.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gertonson, your question to Ms. Stevenson.
Okay.
And it's 1 minute response.
Okay. One of the things that's bugged me a little bit is that it appears that the legislature doesn't represent the people, but it represents the party in power. We've seen Tom Trail be punished for having his own opinion. Joe Stegner dropped from leadership. Thyra, last spring you signed an oath, a loyalty oath, with the party that said that you agreed with everything in that platform without exception, and you were given the opportunity to voice your differences of that opinion. So my question is, will your loyalty lie with the citizens of Nez Perce County and the voters, or with the Republican Party leadership?
As state representative, I represent all the constituents, businesses, individuals, what have you, of Lewis and Nez Perce County. It's my job to make sure that all voices are heard. I do spend a lot of time making sure that I do listen, and it's my job to make sure that I represent all those voices. I have my own personal values. When I go to the legislature, I'm not there to push my values. I'm there to get results, and the way to do it is by working with both parties, all parties, there aren't just two, and achieving results.
Thank you. That's all the questions for the House and Senate. Oh, geez.
It's going to be a long night.
I guess I'm ready to go home, huh? Your question of Mr. Gertonson.
Mr. Gertson, thank you for your question, and I have one. Are you pro-life?
I would say I'm modified pro-life. And what does that mean? That means I believe in all life. I believe a person is born and they need support. I believe a person grows into childhood and they need education. I believe a person gets into their adult life and they may need some help. I believe senior citizens need help. When the aged get aged, we need to help support them. They spent the best years of their life helping us out, working to make this a great country. So I would say I'm pro-life from that standpoint. Now, if you're talking, and I assume you probably are talking about pro-life from conception to birth, that's something that I don't like seeing any life taken.
Time, Mr. Gertonson. Okay, and I see that some of you have handed your questions to the aisles, so just a reminder to please keep doing that so that we can get those grouped together for the end. Keep in mind that the responses will be limited to 1 minute, so try to structure your questions accordingly.
Are we doing this now?
The next group of questions will be for our county commissioners, so they will be directed to Mr. Kelly and Mr. Tippett. And we will start with Mr. Kelly. This first question will be a 2-minute response. What specific steps would you take to assist in job creation in Nez Perce County?
Some of the specific steps I would take are reaching out to all the other counties in the state and seeing what they do to bring jobs, and if it's working, try to duplicate that here. Working with the city, working with the Nez Perce tribe to utilize our natural resources to do that, to make sure that everybody knows that Nez Perce County is open for business. It's just not for sale. When you do that, when you're out trying to draw jobs, you need to make sure that you protect your natural resources. Working with the Chamber of Commerce, the entities that are already in place to help spur economic development. They're already there, so we need to work more with them to do that, but not let them off the leash, I guess.
Thank you. Mr. Tippett?
Well, I've already mentioned I did economic development here in the Valley, working for Valley Vision. Valley Vision is the only organization in the Valley or in the region, in the county, in the region, that actually does outreach and recruitment of businesses. But they do spend a lot of time working with the local business and with the education process. We keep hearing about education. It's further than just in the school system. It's a matter of having qualified employees to work for these manufacturers or these boat builders or whoever we're talking about in the Valley. So, excuse me, there are organizations in the state already. There's the Idaho Economic Development Association, which Valley Vision is a member of, so is the Port of Lewiston. There's the Inland Northwest Economic Alliance, which I happen to was chairman of, which does economic development recruiting to the Northwest and Eastern Washington. We were one member of that. I say we need to continue our efforts with the county to working with Valley Vision, with the CETA, which is the Clearwater Economic Development Association that does community development, streets, roads, fire departments, whatever, in the outreaches of the county. We need to work with the Port of Lewiston. We need to work with the Port of Clarkston. We need to work with the Chamber of Commerce and the other organizations, as Kevin said, that are already outreach or working with the local companies. Again, 80% of the business growth takes place within. Now, you might also notice we have a new manufacturing up on the hill. That was up there because of the URA, or the Urban Renewal Agency, which helped develop that region, which got people interested in moving to Lewiston and hiring also. The URA is important to us to continue that growth in the community. So I will support the outside agency and fund Valley Vision if elected.
Thank you.
Help fund Valley Vision.
Thank you. Our next question is a 1-minute response, and we'll open it up with Mr. Tippett. What is your position on the Urban Renewal Agency regarding the completed projects issue of having the deferred value returned to the tax base?
I think we ought to close up district. There are 3 districts right now. I'm on that board. And there are 3 districts right now. The North Lewiston, which did completely rebuilt the water system. District 2 is Nez Perce Terrace, where SEL now is. That district, I believe, should be closed. That money should then be returned. That money isn't returned. The money, it's the incremental tax increase that's going into the URA. That would now go back to the county, to the city, to the port, a small piece to the port. I think there's a very tiny part that would go to the school district, maybe $1,000, $1,500. It would amount to, I believe, about $100,000 a year to the county's budget, $200,000 back to the city's budget. I'm told that doesn't affect the whole levy, but it does, because it lowers and spreads out a little bit more the assessed value of the community. So we need to keep 3 open because we've already got that project going downtown.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kelly?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Certainly. What is your position on the Urban Renewal Agency regarding the completed projects issue of having the deferred value returned to the tax base?
I support the deferred value being returned back to the tax base.
Okay, thank you. The next question, we'll start with Mr. Kelly. It is a 2-minute response. What do you consider to be the biggest challenges facing the county? Explain what you would do.
Well, right now, one of the largest issues facing the county is obviously the jail bond. But that is being worked on a daily basis by Patty Weeks, and she's doing a great job with that. But obviously, attracting more business and more people and jobs to the county will add more. Will, I apologize. Broaden the tax base, and that's about it right there.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tippett?
Well, Kevin's right. The jail is a major issue. I would give the 3 commissioners there now, and Patty Weeks and other members of the county staff, credit, because the problem isn't solved, but it's getting there. The biggest issue is paying the big bond payments in the next 3 years. After that point, things smooth out, and it'll be easy to take care of. It's actually year 2015 is the one that they're really faced with now, and making sure it's about $2.5 million bond payment that'll have to be paid. Having lost several tax entities like Walmart has affected the county a great deal. The other areas is the economy. We've talked about that, and I believe communications. Communications within the county and communications outside the county. See a lot of breakdown between the city and the county, and I'd like to see some things smoothed out in that area, and I believe that can happen. I didn't mention earlier, I was an elected official in Arizona also. I spent 4 years as mayor of the Yuma, Arizona, and I'm well versed in trying to communicate between government agencies, particularly between a mayor and a chairman of the board of commissioners. So I think I have that background to support or work in that area also. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is the last one for our county commissioner candidates. This one is a 1-minute response, and we'll start with Mr. Tippett. You are to ask your opponent a question, keeping in mind that he only has 1 minute to respond.
I can take a minute to ask, actually, but I'll try to keep it short. I was reading the interview in a newspaper, and Kevin mentioned in there he'd like to see more done with renewable energy. There has been a lot done, and he talked about wind. And we know there is not enough wind here in the valley anyway to do anything about renewable energy. So when he said he has a contemporary economic development plan, I'd like to know what that plan is and how we're going to pay for it.
Well, specifically to speaking to the wind, there is a project that is in Whitman County right now that's going on, and working with the tribe. Perce County has quite a bit of acreage. We can look into studies to develop wind energy. I mean, there's corporations around the world are spending billions of dollars on this. It's not junk science, I guess. It's something that we can invest in ourselves. As far as paying for it, no, I haven't worked that out yet. But there are other things involved as far as there's companies that we can develop our own, so we keep the money here in the valley and the energy also. So, but I've been researching it, and I haven't figured everything out.
Time, Mr. Kelly. Your question now for Mr. Tippett. Keep in mind that he has 1 minute to respond.
Thank you. My question is, earlier you'd mentioned that you would invest more in Valley Vision, which you used to be a part of. In investing more money in that, where does that come from? Do we cut more from things like Meals on Wheels, Boys and Girls Club, Interlink, and maybe go after the Juvenile Detention Center? Or where does that money come from? I mean, economic development is very important, but I think that those other things are very important also. I
don't diminish the importance of other agencies. First of all, the investment in Valley Vision is $5,000 a year, and it was $28,000. Valley Vision's budget runs about $250,000 because they spend a lot of time recruiting outside and marketing this valley outside of the just Boise. It goes all over the country. I would like to see go back to its previous level where it was at $28,000 or $30,000. Where that money comes from is a matter of them going back into the budget and spending a little bit of time determining where it comes from, projecting out what the tax base might be. Hopefully, if we do close up the URA Project 2, come the year after next, there'll be additional money available for Valley Vision, or to put into that, or make it up to the $28,000. Valley Vision's whole overall budget is about 60-40, 60% private, 40% government. So it's not funding the organization.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick reminder to everyone, if you want to pass your questions to the aisles, then the League of Women Voters can grab them and start going through them to review. Our next 4 questions will be for the sheriff candidates. The first question will be for Mr. Buttrey to respond. This first question is a 2-minute response time. What do you consider to be the biggest challenges facing the sheriff, and explain what you would do to remedy those challenges?
Well, the biggest problem at this point right now, of course, is the economy. Right now, we're cutting everything we can to try to help the budget as far as saving money towards the detention center and the money coming there. But that's only a short-term problem. You know, we've done everything we can. We've heck, I've even taken the water out of the, what do they call it, the lunchroom. They no longer have a water cooler in there. That's how much we've cut. But we'll get through that. We'll get the loan paid off. I think the biggest threat to law enforcement right now is technology. Technology is growing faster than we can keep up with. And yeah, it is a problem. But right now, I don't have the manpower to invest in that and keep you safe in the county with the same services that you require right now.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez?
I would agree. I'd say, yeah, one of the biggest challenges is the jail. But what we need to do is we need to have zero tolerance on drugs, alcohol, and suspended drivers. One of the examples I have, we have a gentleman in our county that was cited or arrested 49 times, and he could have been taken to jail those 49 times using a base bond of $500. He would have ended up paying over $24,000 to bond out of jail. Another thing that I would look at is that having a county impound lot. Using the same example, $30 storage a day for having a vehicle in that storage, he would have paid the sheriff's office, not the jail, just the sheriff's office, over $1,400. So the economy and times have changed. I agree with that. But I believe the admin need to adjust their schedules to keep down on overtime. They need to patrol a little bit more, which I plan on doing once I'm elected, because I want people in the community, when asked, who is the sheriff? I want them to be able to say, well, it's Joe Rodriguez. He came here and he helped me with a barking dog call. I want people to get involved in the community. I want to have community councils to where we'll meet with them. We'll get to know the problems. And then if there's a problem with the sheriff's office, I want to hear about it. If it's a legitimate problem, I'm going to deal with it. These are things that we need to do, and we need to get the community back into it. And we need to have also law enforcement involved where we're doing a lot more visibility on patrol. And that's how I'm going to attack this problem that we're having right now.
Thank you. Our next question will go to Mr. Rodriguez first. It is a 1-minute response time. How will the sheriff's office be affected if the Region 11 Juvenile Detention Center in downtown Lewiston is closed?
Let me take a drink of water first.
We won't count that.
What's going to happen is that if we end up closing the Juvenile Detention Center, you're going to end up taking manpower from the jail, from the road, to transfer these juveniles out of the area. We already transfer them to mental institutes, rehabilitation institutes. You close the Juvenile Detention Center, and it's going to impact the sheriff's office in a great deal because you're going to take manpower. It's going to create overtime for the sheriff's office and the detention office as well as patrol, which means the admin's going to have to take on more responsibility of patrol, which I don't have a problem doing with that, but it's going to end up costing the taxpayers money.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Buttrey?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Certainly. How will the sheriff's office be affected if the Region 11 Juvenile Detention Center in downtown Lewiston is closed?
Well, I'm going to have to agree with Mr. Rodriguez that it will definitely affect us in our manpower, in our overtime for transport. But on the other side, too, kind of a yin and yang thing, is about $500,000 of the overage and the juvenile detention center, if it was closed, could come back to the sheriff's office. So that would actually give us some more money. So yeah, it's one of those fuzzy little Yes and no thanks.
Okay, thank you. The next question will go to Mr. Buttrey. This is a 2-minute response time. What are your budget priorities and what funding sources will you pursue to help offset the budget constraints?
Well, right now, the men and women of the Nez Perce County Sheriff's Office are wearing a number of different hats. We have gave up one position in patrol to try to help our budget, and then therefore we have people really going overtime, working different jobs. And so I think, I'm getting lost, but our biggest goal right now is we understand that everybody's hurting right now. This is a bad economy. We have a big balloon payment. We're doing everything that we can to save money to go towards that payment. We've initiated a lot of different programs, everything we can legally so that the inmates actually pay as much as legally possible that we can charge them for. There's nothing else we can do on that. The other thing is everything that we buy local. We went to our new medical staff. It used to go out of county, not out of county, but actually out of state. Now we have local doctors, local staffs. I can't do anything about how much that costs, but what we have done is made sure that that money spent stays here in Nez Perce County. Same thing with vehicles. Before I took office as sheriff, they bought the vehicle fleets out of county, out of Utah. Well, that's when I've started to become sheriff, ever since then, we buy them local. So again, the money we do spend stays here in Nez Perce County.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rodriguez?
Could I hear the question one more time,
Certainly.
please?
It's 2 minutes. And the question is, what are your budget priorities and what funding sources will you pursue to help offset the budget constraints?
One of them would be on the budget priority is revisiting a law on the inmates that we have right now. It was established over a decade ago, and it's where an inmate's charged $25 a day to be housed in Nez Perce County if they're here from Nez Perce County, and a maximum of $500 a year in medical expenses. We need to revisit that to where we can change that law to where it could be adjusted and raised to $50 a day. We could change the medical to $2,000 to $3,000 a year, which the taxpayers aren't, going to be charged for. The other thing we need to do is we need to start looking into grants. There are so many grants. If you look at Orfino Police Department, for example, they got grants to completely remodel their department, to supply new vehicles for their department, and they were in an agency that went to an E99 or E91 ticket, which is an electronic ticket. They were 2 years advanced over Idaho State Police, and that's from a grant. There are so many grants out there. My undersheriff is very knowledgeable about grants. I'm going to get people involved from outside of the sheriff's office involved in grants. That's where the county committees are going to get involved. Businessmen are going to be able to help pursue different ways that we're not thinking of, that we can make money to save the taxpayers from being charged for it. And those are the goals that I'm going to do, is that I'm going to start looking at different ways that I can raise money, save the taxpayers money, and get the grants instead of always waiting until a balloon payment is here and we're not ready for it.
Thank you. The last question for the sheriff candidates is a 1-minute time frame, and this is where you will ask each other a question, keeping in mind that the individual has 1 minute to respond. So, Mr. Rodriguez, your question to Mr. Buttrey.
One of the questions I would ask is use of county equipment and not being used for personal, but used for business. Is there a way that you can critique that or make sure that people aren't using county vehicles for personal use?
Could you repeat the question, please?
I don't remember the question. I should
Make
wrote
it simple.
Do you like my shoes? No, I'm kidding. Is there a way that you can look at to where the county equipment is accounted for and not being used for personal use?
No, the simple answer would be yes. But I think what you're getting at is, has there been employees that have used county equipment with my authorization? And I'll say yes. But on the other hand, there's been county employees who have used their own equipment for the use of the sheriff's department. It's a common sense thing. It's not like they're taking a police car and driving to Seattle for family business, but there are things where we did some moving. People volunteered, they brought their trucks, and they used them to move. And so there was a guy that wanted to use our flatbed trailer to haul some stuff. We weren't using it. It was no problem. Go ahead and use it. Bring it back. That's my answer.
Thank you. Again, a reminder, please be sure to pass your questions to the aisles if you have them. Our next questions are for the prosecuting.
Oh, he's going to ask me a question. I was going to dodge it, but, you know, I figured he's setting an example over there, so I better do it over here.
Actually, I really don't have a question. I just have a comment that I appreciate you looking at ways to make money for the county, but starting an impound yard for the county is actually illegal. The county entities cannot go in business and do something that the public sector is trying to make a money out of. You can't be in conflict in that area. So it wouldn't work. But I appreciate the thought.
Okay.
So you don't want to pose a question?
No, I have a question.
Well, do you want to make something up, Mr. Rodriguez?
No comment.
Okay, now we'll go to the prosecuting attorney candidates. The first question will be to Mr. Torgerson. This is a 2-minute response time. How do you interpret the planning process of the Urban Renewal Agency? Please explain.
Well, I have to admit that I have not really studied the statutes of the Urban Renewal Agency. I know that it is a valuable resource to the community. I believe it is a valuable resource. But I am, from a statutory scheme, I believe I would be misspeaking if I wanted to offer an extended opinion on that, because I have not read the statutes within the last year, and I don't know how they impact Nez Perce County. So I'm not going to pretend that I do know. I'd leave that as my answer.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Spickler?
Well, as been publicized, I have a disagreement with the way it's being handled right now, because my belief is that when you read the statute, it becomes clear that the plan is a blueprint for carrying out a project. And when the statute allows for the plan to be amended, it refers to amendments to the projects and not to come up with an entirely new project that was never mentioned or contemplated in the original plan. And that's what is now being contemplated by the Urban Renewal Agency Board. Listening to the response earlier, I agree that the Terrace project should be shut down. And I also agree that the North Lewiston project, there is one project that they're talking about extending the water lines that would be totally in keeping with the original project in the original plan. and I think that is totally in keeping with the statutes. But there are several other additional projects that I've listened to at the Joint City Council URA meeting that would not be, in my opinion, in keeping with the statute, and that's my answer regarding the statutory design of the URA plan.
Okay, thank you.
And I was under 2 minutes.
So was that?
This next question goes to Mr. Spickler, and it is a 1-minute time frame. What is your position on the use of mental health and drug courts? And please explain.
When I became prosecutor, there were no mental health courts or drug courts, and I was instrumental in starting the first drug court in Nez Perce County. Some of the judges and myself and some of the other facilitators traveled around the country to the different trainings to get certified to have a drug court here in Lewiston. So I was there right at the beginning and am a large supporter of the drug court. I have fought for funding for the drug courts and the mental health courts and alternative courts of every kind. I think they're great.
Thank you. Mr. Torgerson.
Thank you. I can't argue with Mr. Spickler on this. I've been a supporter of the mental health courts and the drug courts since they were first introduced. Judge Bradbury and I worked rather strenuously in our area to establish these courts. I've seen individuals who would otherwise go to prison who would basically use taxpayer money for bed and board, come back just as they are. We have moved them through both drug courts, mental health courts. Oftentimes you can't really discriminate between these two. People with mental health problems will often self-medicate. So you have a double whammy. But these courts are invaluable. I think that we need to work to support them and to fund them as much as possible. So I'm a great supporter of these.
Time. The next question is for Mr. Torgerson. It is a 2-minute time response. How will you implement the budget cuts facing the prosecutor's office?
Well, that's a difficult situation. And I, like others have, county candidates have spoken to this. There is a limited amount of what you can do. But, the reality is that if you cut the prosecutor's office, you cut the number of prosecutors, you also cut the amount of work that's going to come out of the prosecutor's office. In other words, you can't cut positions and at the same time increase productivity. It doesn't really work that way. And I think what you have to do is prioritize, and I'm sure that Mr. Spickler has looked at this. But you have to work within the framework of what the county commissioners give you. You don't have a lot of choices, but there are ways to modify some of your responses, but at the same time, you want to prioritize criminal prosecution. I think that's the priority of all prosecutors' office. If you've got people out there hurting other people, that's the first thing you take up. It may be that some other crimes will be under-prosecuted. For instance, bad checks. They are a real bane for the merchants, but at the same time, nobody's getting end up in the hospital for a bad check. So you have to use what you have. You have to prioritize with what you have. But I think what we need to do is negotiate and communicate with those who are making the budget, work with those individuals, and try to see where we can make cuts and still optimize the number of prosecutors that we have. And we want to keep those individuals.
Time. Mr. Spickler?
This year, when I submitted my budget to the commissioners, I presented a budget that had over $100,000 in proposed reductions. And when it was done, the commissioners added some mental health expenses that are not my responsibility pursuant to either statute or Constitution, which still left my budget less than it was the year before or the year before that. So I believe that we are continuing to reduce the expenses. But the problem that we run into is that unlike some other departments, we are controlled by statute and by Constitution, that we're required to protect the rights and the privileges of every citizen of the state and of this county. And at some point, a lack of funding becomes a constitutional violation. And at some point, my job is to call a halt to that and have a court decide. Now, this year I've decided not to do that because to take away even more resources from the county and from my office would just make the matters worse. And there's going to be a new commission that may take a different view of things next year, and we'll see.
Okay, thank you. The last question, last of the prepared questions, will go first to Mr. Spickler. And this is a 1-minute time limit, and this gives you the opportunity to ask your opponent a question.
Thank you. I want to make one comment here. Torg is, I've always considered Torg a friend of mine, and I still do. And he's a good man, but we're here to determine who's the best man for the job, and it's not Torg.
Is that a question?
My question, I've read your advertisements, Torg, and your headline is "It's time for a change." Torg, tell me, if you're elected, what would you change about my office?
Well, I think what I would look at primarily is the ability to maintain and keep quality personnel. I know that you are earlier, within the last 12 months, lost a very good individual. And that individual was, in fact, the commissioners wanted to keep this guy. And I think that that's one of the things I would look at is to enable good prosecutors to stay prosecutors and to work with them and to find out what they need in order to continue working for the office. I think that communication between the law enforcement agencies and the prosecutor's office needs to be rebuilt. And I would work diligently at that, and I have success in that particular framework.
Okay, and Mr. Torgerson, your question for Mr. Spickler, again with the 1-minute response.
Thank you. Dan, you mentioned it in passing, but I thought I'd give you a better chance to answer. Were you really literally thinking about filing a lawsuit within the county and using county taxpayers' money to do this?
Yeah, I considered it. And it's happening more and more across the state, as you know, Torg. There's probably 4 or 5 counties where it's going on now, to the point where at the recent Idaho Association of Counties meeting, they passed a resolution trying to get the statute that allows people to do that repealed in the next legislature because they're so afraid of it. Right now, as everybody knows, there's a move going on where the number one goal of, it appears, most county commissioners is under no circumstances do we raise taxes. And as the cost of everything goes up, there is no more money for anything.
Mr. Spickler. Well, good job, candidates, because we made it through all of our prepared questions. So that gives us the opportunity to ask some questions from the audience. Our first questions will go to the 4 candidates who are here for the state and the House, Senate and the House. And the question is, and these are all 1-minute responses, and we'll start with Mr. Bradbury. Healthcare reform has given the state the opportunities and problems, but the legislature has seen fit to ignore those opportunities. What are your views on Medicaid expansion, state health exchange, and efforts to nullify federal law?
It's hard to answer that in a minute because it's a complicated question, but in terms of a local exchange, I'm 100% in favor of it. I think you ought to be able to call Boise instead of have to call Washington, D.C. I think you ought to be dealing with insurers that are nonprofit. Our medical premiums in this state are lower by almost $1,000 a year than they are in other states. I think it would help preserve that. I think if we went to a federal exchange, we'd lose that advantage. In terms of expanding Medicaid, I'm all in favor of it. Now it's about $70 million a year, half paid by the county and half paid by the general fund for Medicaid. If we expand it, this county only has to pay 10% after 4 years. That would cost about $20 million. We'd save $50 million a year if we expanded Medicaid as is proposed by the Affordable Care Act.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you for the question. Expansion of Medicaid, the Governor's Task Force is looking at that right now, and I'm most interested in the numbers that they come up with. Certainly, if we can show a savings by doing that, I would support that. We're going to have to balance that against our cap fund that we currently have. The health exchange, I would be open to discussing a private not-for-profit exchange, such as the Idaho Health Data Center type thing, which the task force is also looking at. We kind of have that framework in place, so yes, I would be open to that. In terms of nullification, the third part of the question, I quite honestly don't know enough about the issues there, but it doesn't sound like it's something that I want to get close to.
Thank you. Mr. Gertonson?
Oh, I'm going to have you repeat the question, please.
No. Just kidding. Certainly. Healthcare reform has given the state opportunities and problems, but the legislature has seen fit to ignore those opportunities. What are your views on Medicaid expansion, the state health exchange, and efforts to nullify federal law?
The healthcare exchange. We have 3 possibilities here. We could have set up our own healthcare exchange. I thought, the state of Idaho is always clamoring about states' rights. Let's have states' rights. By golly, they should have some rights and nullify federal law. But we have a state's right to set up our own health care or health exchange. They didn't do that. So now we're down to option 2, which is to set up a partnership with the federal government and with the state and hopefully work into a full state exchange. Well, I think we have until the middle of November sometime to get that done. Now, if that doesn't happen, then we go to the federal program. And that's going to cost us about $1,000 more. Medicaid expansion, you betcha, is paid for the first 3 years, and then after that it's 90%. And I'm probably done with my time. Doggone it. Audience, I want you to remember, you only have a minute for us to answer these questions.
Ms. Stevenson, did you want me to repeat it?
No, that's
Oh,
fine.
okay.
And as Mr. Gertonson says, that's a lot to pack into a minute. So forgive me if I talk really fast. I support individuals, organizations, and policymakers, that's us and you, all working collectively to assure that the conditions under which Idahoans will be healthy. A great majority of the people I've spoken with over the past several months want legislature to enact free market reforms, providing access to affordable health care. It empowers individual families and businesses. It empowers owners to control their own health care and economic decisions. People have specified that they want more private sector competition versus exchanges. Now, the others mentioned the governor's task forces and committees, and a number of those decisions will be made by November 16th. I gather, I listen, and I'll defend the voters' decisions.
Thank you. The next question is for our commissioner candidates, so Mr. Kelly and Mr. Tippett. Over 80% of county government is mandated by statute. Why is economic development so important, and how will its funding be prioritized in these economic times? Mr. Kelly, 1 minute.
The reason that economic development is so important is because the more economic development, the less we pay in taxes as citizens, because the tax base is broader. Could you repeat the second part? Sorry.
Okay. Over 80% of county government is mandated by statute. Why is economic development so important, and how will its funding be prioritized in these economic times?
The funding will be, from my point of view, should be prioritized in a balanced manner, taking everything into account. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tippett?
Well, economic development is important. You've got to understand, we're talking about job creation, and we're talking about business expansion. When you expand a business, they build more buildings, they add more equipment, they hire people. Their tax assessments go up, or their assessed value goes up, which they pay more taxes. If we have enough of it, spreads it out amongst the population, our taxes go down a little bit. Hopefully that's what happens. With these economic times, it doesn't happen overnight. So we work a lot with the local businesses and have that happen locally, make sure we expand the local businesses. Prioritizing it, again, like I say, I'm talking $28,000, $30,000 in a huge budget. So it's not a top priority. 80%, obviously, if that number is correct, 80%, then that's the priority. And then economic development is in that other 20%. So it's high up in there. I won't say it's the best, it's the top, but it's certainly not the lowest. It's got to be in the mix.
Okay, thank you.
Out of time.
Our next question is for the sheriff candidates. With gas prices on the rise, what would you do under the current budget to reduce the amount the sheriff's office spends on fuel? This question's first posed to Mr. Rodriguez, and that's 1 minute.
One of the ways that I would end up managing the fuel budget is going to certain areas such as Peck, Southwick, going stationary, starting to meet the citizens in there, start doing business checks, starting to figure out what's going on there, and that's community policing. The other thing is I would probably get rid of the bigger vehicles, higher consumption. Some of your pickup trucks that are being used for the sheriff's office, they would probably be sold off to more economical vehicles other than the ones that we're using for pulling the boats or the trailers.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Buttrey?
Well, the gas prices have been on the rise since I took office. One of the things that we've done is my support staff no longer has take-home cars. They used to, but they're offline. They don't do that anymore. We only have a $60,000 budget for vehicles, so I can't be getting rid of my trucks and getting newer, more economical vehicles. I wish we could. We would do it. The other thing we can do is double up on night shift when you have both crews on there. The guys can get together, and they should be doing that. And they should be going out to Peck and being stationary and walking around and talking to the citizens now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next question is for our prosecuting attorney candidates. Mr. Torgerson, and again, this is a 1-minute response. Are prisons handled by the state or by contractors? And could you please explain?
Well, the state prison systems are both here in Idaho. We have primarily a state-funded prison system, but there are also at least one private prison down outside of Boise that is still in operation. They've had some problems, they've had some lawsuits, but for the most part, the bulk of the prisoners are being handled by the state prison system. The outcome on this is that we need to work closely with the parole officers whose loads are becoming heavier and heavier as individuals are paroled perhaps earlier than they might have otherwise been, say, 10 years ago. But if we continue to work with those parole officers, I think we can manage this load and make it workable.
Okay, Mr. Spickler.
Torg's exactly right in terms of the state prison. We also are encouraging in our meetings with the director of the state prison system to allow overflow to come into the county jails, although we're pretty much full most of the time now. But one of the hard effects of this is that because of the fact that our prisons are mostly full, the judges seem to be less inclined to put felons in prison anymore, and the legislature seems to be less inclined to create new felonies in the legislature. So enforcing criminal activity is much more difficult from a prosecution standpoint.
Time, Mr. Spickler. Thank you. This next question goes to the House and Senate representatives or candidates. And we'll start with Mr. Johnson. Again, a 1-minute response. Do you support the repeal of the closed primary legislation?
I do not support a closed primary. As state committeeman for the Nez Perce County Republican Central Committee 2 years ago at the state convention, I voted against that. The larger body voted for it. That was the process, and that's what we lived with. So I know the party will look at that, but I did vote against that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gertonson?
Could you repeat the question, please?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Could you repeat the question,
Certainly.
please?
Do you support the repeal of the closed primary legislation?
Well, it's my understanding that the Republican Party sued the state, and I don't think it's up to the Republican Party to change that, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's the legislature doesn't have anything to do with what the Republican Party has come up with, and they sued and they won, and they have the right to affiliate. I do know that it was about 53 years ago that the Democratic Party did the same thing. And the voters in that next election were so appalled that the Democrats lost power. And then it was tried again in 1972 when Andrus, I believe, was in office, and he repealed it. So unless we learn from history, we're probably going to be bound and determined to repeat it.
Time. Oop, I'm sorry.
You want me to keep going for another 13 and a half
Yes.
seconds? All right. So no, I don't like the closed primaries. I think it messes with people's privacy. It keeps a whole sector of the public from voting because they're worried about what's going to happen.
Thank you. Ms. Stevenson?
I need to have you clarify what you mean when you say the repeal. Is there some piece of legislation I'm not aware of? Or did you mean a repeal?
The way that the question is worded, again, this is from the audience, is do you support repeal of the closed primary legislation?
Oh, now this time you didn't say the word "the." Is it? What is the question?
Do you support repeal of the
Okay.
closed primary legislation?
And they may have had a different question, so I will answer the way you phrased it the third time. No.
Okay. Mr. Bradbury.
Well, the legislature doesn't have the constitutional authority to repeal that. A federal judge decided that that was a constitutional right under the right of assembly, and so it is not within the province of the legislature. The only organization that can repeal that is the Republican Party itself. I think it showed bad judgment when it did that for a couple of reasons. When I was a judge, I would not have voted in a primary because I do not think I could have appeared impartial and had to have declared a party. I think that there are state employees that would be reluctant to vote for fear they might be punished or on the, if they disclosed their preference. I think it's terribly invasive in terms of privacy, and I think it suppresses the vote in the primary. But it's not my decision. It's not the legislature's decision. That's up to the Republican Party. And I think they would be well advised to repeal it.
Okay, thank you. This question will pose to all 10 candidates, and we will start with Mr. Spickler. And you'll have 1 minute to respond. If you had one wish in this political season, what would that wish be?
That the proper candidates win. One wish. I wish that the campaigns, all the campaigns, could be as genteel as the campaign between Torg and myself, I think. I don't like viciousness between candidates. You can have disagreements on ideas, and those can be done gentlemanly.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Torgerson?
Well, I think, well, that's interesting. I didn't do this. It's not my fault.
Oh, somebody on the back.
Should I go ahead?
Oh, yeah, back there.
I am told I'm to continue. Well, I would like on November 7th to be friends with Dan Spickler. So I hope that will be. Also, I'd like to have Mr. and Mrs. Trump move into our area. Anytime within the next 30 days would be fine.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rodriguez?
I was going to say, I'm trying to think of how far I want to go out on a limb and have an open expenditure on a wish list for the patrol department, sheriff's office, but I guess I just want everybody, a wish list would be everybody who's capable to vote to go out and vote. Amen. Because without those votes, you're going to sit back, you have no right to complain about anything. So I just want everybody to show up and vote.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Buttrey?
Well, my wish would be that future sheriff office races would be nonpartisan, because it really has nothing to do with politics. We never ask the question when you're booked in, hey, are you a Republican or a Democrat? We don't ask that question when we give you a ticket, are you a Republican or a Democrat? And I never even asked my wife that before I asked her to marry me. So I really don't think it has anything to do with the sheriff's office. It should just be run on the individual's responsibilities, their knowledge, background, and politics shouldn't have a darn thing to do with it.
I agree.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tippett?
Isn't this the place you're supposed to say world peace or something like that? You know, that's a big question, and I wish the outcome of this election. Dan says that we'll all remain friends. I appreciate the candor, wish this meeting is gone tonight. It's been great. I did not enjoy the debates that much, watching everything that's been going on, all the name calling and finger pointing and accusations that hasn't occurred tonight. It's been very pleasant. So I guess I wish you peace. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly?
My wish is that everybody that is elected, whoever that may be, is able to put aside all partisanship and to do the job that they're elected to do, which is represent the people, no matter what. And you don't go as a Republican or a Democrat, you do it for the people. And that's what I'd like to see, because I think that would get a lot of results.
Thank you. Ms. Stevenson?
Since everybody's keeping it somewhat light, I'll add to that with two pieces. I wish it were November 7th already. And then the second part is, I wish that more people would take part in the process of citizens being engaged in our municipalities and in our governance. And thank you all who are here this evening and are watching, because I know it can be like watching paint dry sometimes, but it is important to have people engaged, and so I appreciate that, and I wish more people can be encouraged to take part.
Mr. Gertonson?
I always liked watching paint dry. I'm thinking, is it going to drip? I don't know. I'll have to agree with Thyra. This is probably the second time we'll agree. Voter apathy just drives me nuts. Just absolutely drives me nuts. We had a city council race last year. We had 3 open seats and 3 candidates running. And you know what I heard from the voters? Why do I even have to go vote? Doesn't make any difference. Well, let me just say, damn, it does. It really does. The cost, that would be my second wish if I got 3 wishes and you rub the bottle right and you maybe get a third one. The cost of an election is crazy, just absolutely nuts. There should be some way to run for a political office where the average person can do that. And somehow it's got, serving in an office has got to come in reach of the average person. That's what I'd like to see.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
I wish that we can sit down and truly listen to one another and try to resolve our problems together, because I do believe that all of us want what's best for Idaho, and I sincerely believe that. And also, I wish that we as people can focus on some of the good things that we're doing here in Idaho, because we are doing some good things, and not allow ourselves to be dragged down by circumstances or, even the world politics or national politics. I think we have it good here in Idaho. And so I hope that we can focus on some of those things so that we can be more positive in how we look at things.
Thank you. Mr. Bradbury?
Well, I answer this question both as a citizen and as an Army veteran. If I had my way, I would require everyone who didn't vote spend a day at the Arlington National Cemetery and count the graves of those who fought so we could vote.
Okay, thank you. Well, if everyone could please join me in thanking our candidates for taking the time to be here to educate us. There are some materials out front that the candidates have brought, so you're more than welcome to go ahead and peruse those and, I believe, take some information. Just a couple things to keep in mind. There's the Idaho Voters Pamphlet and sample ballot that has been provided. Please review it. Please remember to pre-register to vote by this Friday. You have until 5 p.m. Absentee ballot voting, you must be registered, and you have until now through November 2nd to do that. Take your picture ID and review the flyer that's been placed in front of you and as you leave, because it has some very valuable information. So thank you, everyone.